Right, okay, I think we better get started. So just very quickly, just a quick round of introductions so you know who's presenting to you today. So my name is Dan Hawtrey. I am the MD of Content Formula, and we're a digital workplace consultancy. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Content Formula in a minute. But Joe, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Joe Perry. I'm head of technology at Content Formula. Yeah, so it's my job to kind of understand and work with all of the different things across Microsoft 365. And today, yeah, we're going to talk about PowerApps, which we're really excited about.
And John, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So yeah, I'm John Scott. I'm the head of user experience at Content Formula. So I help define in the early stages what solutions should look and feel like, taking into account the needs of users as well as the objectives of the business.
Great, thanks a lot, John. So guys, just to warn you before we start, we're having a few problems with the GoToMeeting application, and we're experiencing connection problems, and our voices are dragging a bit, and also video problems. So hopefully we're going to be okay. I'm just going to warn you in advance, though, if we have problems, we'll try and fix them as we go along, but hopefully it won't affect us. So just quickly, I just want to take the opportunity to talk a little bit more about Content Formula before we jump into the main meat of the webinar. So for those of you that are not aware, Content Formula, we've been around since 2005. We're based in London. We're a digital workplace consultancy, but we specialize in Office 365, SharePoint, Teams, the Power Platform, and all of the other components that make up the Microsoft family. We also resell and implement digital workplace software. So we've got some partnerships with various software providers, obviously including Microsoft, but also including LiveTiles, LMS 365, Nintex, and GoOne as well. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those offerings in a moment. We offer managed support services. So if you've got an application that needs supporting, we can help you. We've got a very strong focus on UX and usability. That's kind of one of the things that we feel makes us stand out from our competition. And we're proud to have won multiple awards. We work with companies of all different shapes and sizes. I've just got some logos here of companies that you'll probably recognize, but yeah, there are smaller ones that we work with as well. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about our service lines. So I'm just going to cover off sort of 4 or 5 different service lines. I'll promise to be really quick before we get into the webinar. But yeah, one of the services that we provide, which is very popular with our customers, is our Office 365 application support. It's a managed service. We've got an SLA-based response, and we've got a 3-tier escalation model in that. So starting with the service desks, then going through to SharePoint and Office 365 consultants, and then escalating to the 3rd level for Office 365 specialists. And we've got a dedicated help desk with tickets being raised and tracked through Jira. We're quite well known for delivering Wisdom intranets. So Wisdom is a leading intranet tool owned by LiveTiles. It's built for Office 365, but it's designed to be installed inside SharePoint and Teams, and there's also a mobile app as well. And there's a whole bunch of functionalities that you get with Wisdom, and it really does enhance SharePoint. It gives you a lot more sophistication that you don't get with SharePoint out of the box. So you know, if it's sophisticated news, notice boards, if you need to do push alerts and content targeting, if you need mandatory reads, policies and procedures, all of this kind of stuff, then Wisdom's the tool for you. It's got a really popular, in fact, it's really growing in popularity, the Wisdom for Teams application as well. If you feel intranet in a box is not for you, but you still want an intranet and you want to use just the standard out-of-the-box SharePoint features and functionality, we've also got a service line around that. We find that this is more suitable for smaller organizations that maybe have less sophisticated needs when it comes to their intranet. But the big benefit of going down this route, unlike Wisdom, of course, is that there's no ongoing license costs. Once you've paid the sort of the development costs for us to build your intranet, there are no license costs. Another product that we've recently added to our portfolio is LMS 365, which is a learning management system built for Office 365, and it's fully integrated into SharePoint and Teams. It's it's got a really nice, slick interface in all of those platforms, and it's also got an iOS and Android app. It allows you to effectively maintain a course catalog of online learning, classroom learning, and also virtual classroom, so webinar type learning. And you can auto-enroll your learners, you can track their attendance, and obviously finally you can report on their attendance. It's very, very popular. If you've got kind of training compliance requirements, then it's a very popular and useful tool. Another service that we offer also is very much kind of in the same train as LMS 365. We offer off-the-shelf learning content, and we partner with a company called GoOne. They are the Netflix of e-learning content. They've got over 70,000 courses that are aggregated across lots of different content providers, and you can pretty much find a course on any kind of business topic that you can think of. So whether it's soft skills, management skills, maybe skills related to a particular function or department, industry skills, compliance, and so on and so forth. So they've got a ton of content to choose from. They've got lots of different formats of content as well, whether you're looking for micro learning or longer format training courses. Everything's also automatically kept up to date. Last but not least, the service, and another service line of ours that we're finding this kind of more and more interest in nowadays is around business apps. And we can help you, if you've got some business requirements and you think that they could be fixed with some sort of app either built within Microsoft Teams or something built with PowerApps, and maybe leveraging Microsoft Flow or Power Automate as it's now called, then yeah, do get in touch. But anyway, that's the end of that bit, and let's get on to the proper webinar. So we're going to talk today about PowerApps, and John's going to kick off with a little bit of an introduction on PowerApps.
Thanks, Dan. I'll just need to share my screen, please, if you can make me presenter. Thanks. Okay, so you should all see PowerPoint slide now. Please shout if you can't see that in the chat, or Dan and Joe, obviously. So yeah, we're going to talk today about PowerApps. We're going to show you some examples. But first, just to very briefly set the scene a bit about what PowerApps is, what it allows you to do. Basically, if you want to create an app to model, to facilitate a business process, or a task that happens within your business, let's take, for example, a simple example, something like expense claims. So most companies will have employees needing to complete expense claims, maybe at the end of the month, for example, to have that money refunded. If you're a big company, you may well use some sort of off-the-shelf package for that. If you're a smaller company, you may do that with an email or spreadsheets. If you wanted to create an app to do just that thing, to allow people to submit expense claims from from a mobile device, from a tablet device, from their desktop computer, without PowerApps, say before PowerApps, then you would have to pretty much do it in this way. So you'd have your sort of Office 365 suite. You've got in there your SharePoint, your Office apps, Teams, Power BI, and others. You could say, right, we're going to do this, we're going to model this process in SharePoint, and you could, build out a list where all the expense claims go into, and people submit them via a form in SharePoint. You could do it that way. The negatives of that are that you're basically, people have to use the SharePoint UI. There's lots of other stuff in there that they don't need to see or use as part of their user journey. And also, you will hit limitations within the SharePoint UI. You don't want that button there, or you don't want that field to appear like that, and you have no choice because that's just the way SharePoint works. So that has its sort of downsides. So your alternative then, if that doesn't work for you, is to perhaps build a custom app in SharePoint. So you create a custom sort of page or area within your SharePoint intranet that allows people to submit their expense claims. Maybe that's a modern web part or something like that, but it requires a developer to build something custom in SharePoint, and you still have to send people to SharePoint in the web browser to do that, to kind of use that expense claim app. Another alternative then is, especially if you want to deliver this on mobile effectively, is to create a custom app. Let's say, a native mobile app, maybe for iOS, maybe for Android or both, that allows people to submit their expense claims, and that needs to talk to Office 365. It needs to send data to Office 365. It needs to pull data from Office 365. It's going to require a sort of specialist development team to build that app, the full sort of experience from the back end perspective, and also the user experience, the front end. So it's quite an undertaking, even for a small, even for a fairly simple use case like claiming expenses. But with PowerApps, and this is kind of the power of PowerApps, if you like, that it changes the sort of the setup here, the environment. And it's actually more like this. So you have your various Office 365 apps, and then on top of that, you sort of have a PowerApps layer. So you've got PowerApps able to interact and interface with all of those different apps within Office 365, and then you just build your Power App on top of that layer using a sort of builder tool. So it helps you to build the interface. It is all automatically connected with all those apps, and you can create a version optimized for mobile versus one optimized for desktop and tablet and so on, very easily. You don't actually need to know code. There's some elements where you need to use some simple language, queries for language, but you don't have to. There's a lot that PowerApps in that layer has already done for you in terms of setting up the infrastructure, and your app it's much more straightforward and less time intensive to build and sit on top of that PowerApps layer. So that's the sort of beauty of PowerApps. That's why it's so interesting being able to build these little apps, well, sometimes bigger apps, but often small apps for very specific tasks that are already hooked into everything, and you're sort of building on the shoulders of giants kind of analogy, really. And also it just requires less investment, less time, and you can make sure that the UI, the user interface, the user journey for performing those tasks like expense claims is fully optimized to just that process for people. So you can show people exactly the fields you want, at the time you want to, and so on and so forth. So that's really the sort of the benefits of PowerApps. I don't know if Dan or Joe, you wanted to add anything to that, or if not, I can move on to the first example.
Yeah, I think you've covered it nicely there. I don't think I've got much to add from a technical perspective.
Same here, yeah. Well done, John.
Okay, cool. So of course, if people have got questions, pop them in the chat window. We'll try to answer them at the end, or maybe as we go, if there's an opportune moment. I'll jump into the first example of a Power App that we've got here. So just 1 second. Okay, so oh, sorry, I'll just need to explain the setup of this slightly, the context. So just let me go into that. Yeah, so basically what I'm going to show you now is what we call the Finance Tracker app. Now, this is basically an app that helps a customer of ours company to track invoices for a certain type of service delivery that they provide. So basically, or sorry, that they consume. So basically, the process, the business process that's being followed is that a supplier who's providing medical services invoices them. That then needs to go for a set of business people for approval. You know, basically, was that service provided? Do they agree that the cost is correct, and et cetera, et cetera. And then once that's approved by them, it goes through to the finance team, who will then approve it for payment. They're checking all the PO details and the budgeting, et cetera. And that's the process in a nutshell, really. And there's also a bit of reporting on top of that. So getting visibility of things like, okay, what's the total amount spent on a PO across all invoices and that sort of thing. So as I was saying earlier, when I was talking about the Office 365 apps, the separate apps, you could do this process, purely in SharePoint. Just, invite your suppliers, give them accounts, give them access to SharePoint, get them to create their invoices in a document library or something like that. You could model it that way, or you could potentially do it with Microsoft Forms, and then filling in a form and it's getting sent off and then stored in SharePoint maybe. But the problem with doing that, and some of you may have experienced this, is that you're basically asking suppliers, potentially suppliers who have never worked with SharePoint, or it's not their system, they don't use it in their company. You're introducing them to SharePoint. You're going to have to give them a lot of kind of contextual knowledge and understanding about the way SharePoint works and the UI. They're going to see stuff in there that they don't need to see, even though you can permission control stuff. They're still going to be exposed to elements of the SharePoint experience that they don't need to know or use just for the process, just for the purposes of adding an invoice to the system and then reviewing it when you reject it for certain reasons. It's just not, the process, the experience, the UI of SharePoint isn't optimized around just delivering this functionality. So there are downsides to it. And what we've done with the Power App that we created for this process is allow the suppliers to have a very clean interface, which is actually, well, it's clean but complex because there's a lot of detail in it, but it's totally focused on just this process, just this operation of submitting invoices and tracking them through the system. But also the business owners, they have a view that allows them to quickly see the status of invoices, see their details, and approve or reject them purely, in this system. And the interface is able to be used on tablet and mobile as well. So it has a lot of benefits being brought into PowerApps, and I'm just going to show you that app now. So we just go into the app. So this is the app itself in PowerApps now. You can see this is just in a browser window here, but you can deliver this via. It was basically designed to be used in iPad particularly as well. So it can also be delivered via iPad app within the PowerApps suite on iOS. Oh, sorry, I should say iPad OS now, because it's now iPad OS. So this experience can be had there or in a browser like you're seeing here. Same experience actually. We've deliberately designed the interface to be sort of quite large so that it supports both a sort of touch interface and traditional mouse and keyboard. And what you see in here is the overview screen. So here I can just quickly see whether I'm a supplier, business owner, or a finance kind of officer. I can see how many invoices we've got, or credit notes, invoices or credit notes we've got in the system at the moment. There's 9 in total. There's 1 that's being reviewed or ready for review by the supplier, 4 that are reviewed or need to be reviewed by the business, and 1 that needs to be reviewed by the finance team. And that each invoice is supposed to go through that process step by step. So we can see how many invoices or credit notes there are at various stages of the process. In fact, if I want to look at just credit notes, I can click here on the left to see just credit notes listed, and it will just filter down to credit notes only. If I'm the business owner and I need to see which ones I need to review and approve or reject, I can click into the Ready for Review tab here, and it just gives me those ones listed out. And likewise, if I was the finance approver, I would just click on that list to see the ones I need to review there. In the background, by the way, as the invoices get approved and they move to the next stage, then that does trigger a flow in the background as part of Power Automate, which will notify the group of approvers that there is an item here ready in the Power App for you to look at and approve or reject. But yeah, but I could just come in and, having missed that email perhaps, and look at the system and see, okay, I've got 4 that are ready for review here for me. Ultimately, with the real data in the system, this is just test data, obviously, because it's sensitive, but the real data in the system, there could be thousands of these invoices coming from multiple suppliers. So we've got search controls as well. So I can search for a particular invoice number or PO number and see all the invoices from one PO. But if I was to click on an example invoice here, so this one here, test invoice 5, I'll click on that and it will go through to the details panel. So this is, it should do. Yeah, here we go. So this is the sort of details panel of the invoice. You can see there's actually quite a lot of information here. So it's not super simple because there's actually quite a lot of information. But it's totally focused on this particular type of content. The UI has been designed just for the approval of invoices and credit notes. So there's no other extra stuff that you don't need in here. And also everything's nice and big, so it works well on non-desktop displays. But then as the business, I can then approve or reject this because that's the sort of state it's in at the moment. It needs approval. I can do that here. I can edit it if some information needs to be added by me at this stage before approval. I can do that as well here in PowerApps. In the background, this information is actually being stored in SharePoint. So just as with all your other data within Office 365, it's protected by all of the Office 365 security. It's secured in the same way. It is permission controlled in the back end by SharePoint. It does mean that you can export custom reports outside of the Power App from SharePoint to do your own reporting, perhaps in Power BI and that sort of thing as well. So yeah, it's not kind of, the data isn't contained in the Power App itself. It's stored elsewhere in SharePoint and fully accessible there as well. So I'll just go back to the home screen for that. So yeah, I would click there, I would approve it or reject it. If I rejected something as the business owner, it would kick it back to the supplier state phase. In fact, yeah, so it would click it back to the supplier to update some details with my note about what's being rejected. One other thing to note about the interface here within PowerApps is that we actually have a create dialog as well, or option. So so we completely remove the need for anyone to go to SharePoint, because you can even create the initial invoice there. You don't have to go to SharePoint to add it in. You click on the plus here, you click create new invoice, and you get the form for creating the item here in PowerApps. So you fill in these fields, and what you put in gets captured in SharePoint. But it does mean you can have some additional rules and controls introduced by PowerApps. So if, for example, I wanted a certain field here to be only visible to certain users, but in SharePoint, I might not be able to achieve that with the kind of controls that you have available in SharePoint. But in PowerApps, I have extra levels of controls to hide or show UI elements, user interface elements, to people depending on who they are and what groups they're in. I can give them a completely different layout if I want to for filling out this form depending on who they are. So that is again where PowerApps gives you much more control and more ability to fine-tune the experience, the journey, and the user interface for the particular task that you're sort of having people perform. So that you can do that in here. And then if I go back again to the main screen here, there's another element to this, which is the reporting. So I can go to reports here, and I can then, you know, I may have many invoices in this system, all under one particular PO, maybe in one particular year. I can get a snapshot of this, for example, test PO here for this year. I can see what the total value of the PO is, what the budget is, and the spend based on, you know, all the invoices that have been entered into the system, and at the moment, how much have I actually spent against that PO. So it just gives me a very sort of simple summary report, and I can then go to different, in this case we've got business units, so we can look at their different POs, or maybe it's the same PO but different business units are using that, you know, single PO, and we can see how many invoices there are from those business units contributing to this this total, and the total going towards the total budget. So there's some simple reporting built into the Power App here. This could be extended further though with Power BI, which is something that we're looking to do, where you actually, you know, you either go to Power BI to consume very interactive reports, or we pull in a Power BI report here and we actually see it within the interface of the Power App. That's, you know, totally possible as well, and something that we've been looking at as part of the roadmap for this particular product. But yeah, so that's this particular example in a nutshell, I guess.
So John, just on that, just on the roadmap point then. So, I mean, from a technology point of view, you mentioned things like Power Automate there, like so Power Automate being the workflow engine. I guess it's kind of doing a lot of the stuff in the background. I guess natural next steps could be to actually populate other systems with this data, right? Or like kick off something in Sage, or do something with their actual finance system, isn't it? We could actually use Power Automate to expand this out further, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, for example, when the finance group approve an invoice here, it's basically then needs to be paid. So that could be sent to, it doesn't currently get automatically sent to the sort of payment system. It's done by the finance officer manually, but yeah, it could be done with a flow and an external connector to that finance system. Yeah.
And what about at the other end of the workflow, when the invoice is first coming in as perhaps a paper invoice? Is it possible to capture that and put that into the system?
But by scanning and OCR, do you mean? Or
yes,
yeah. So it would be possible to scan it. I think I'm not sure about the OCR apps or plugins available. I don't know, Joe, if you know anything more about that particular area. But
I know there's stuff in Azure we can definitely do with OCR. I'm not sure too much around PowerApps itself. From what I recall, I don't think there's anything out of the box that gives you kind of OCR within as a Power App kind of feature, but Azure is packed full of that stuff.
And so you could actually do it over Azure and then connect your Power App to Azure and just bring it in that way then.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of AI builder capabilities inside of Power Apps that may well plug in nicely. In my demo, actually, I'm going to show you a couple of things around kind of like taking an image using the device, so like me taking a photo and perhaps doing something with that. So yeah, we can certainly dive deeper on what that could look like shortly.
Okay, all right.
Just to clarify, we're saying OCR, and it's optical character recognition. So what we mean there is, you know, the scanning in of a physical document and some process to understand that content that's on that physical document, translate it into digital, you know, text in the system.
And I know they do it with business cards right now. I know there's an OCR business card reader inside of there. I'm not sure if it goes as far as kind of like letter recognition, like you're saying there.
Okay, all right. So Joe, I'm going to pass you over the controls for presenting. Over to you.
Cool. So I'm going to go a little bit further than John, talk about kind of a user on the move now. So someone who's perhaps a working estate agent, or someone who's got to look after properties, have a property portfolio, and we're going to look at how we can actually leverage some of the device features, such as the built-in camera in an iPhone, for instance, GPS potentially, and then perhaps look at some of those bits a bit deeper in Azure, what we can then do with that information. So here we've got a property management app that's built in PowerApps. You can see here I'm in my PowerApps Studio. I've built it as a mobile app this time. I'm just going to go ahead and play it right now, and it's showing me a personalized list of properties that I manage. Now, it may show a different list for other users because, like John's app, I'm storing my data in SharePoint. I have item level permissions where I only see the properties that I have access to. I can create a new property up the top right corner. So I can fill out the details here. I'm asking for a title, a subtitle, and notes. And I get the ability to add photos. So I'm just going to quickly turn off my webcam here because I'm going to actually utilize my computer webcam right now. And I'm going to go ahead and take some photos of my property that I'm at. Hopefully that starts using it.
We can't see anything for now, Joe. There's a bit of a lag.
Yeah.
When bear that in mind.
It's not showing it on mine yet. Oh, in fact, sorry. I clicked off the screen share and not my webcam, so there's a bit of a stupid one there. Can you see my Power App again, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm in the building I want to take photos of right now. I can use my device webcam to take a photo by tapping, and it then logs that photo against my app. So I can now go ahead and click done, and it's got my 2 photos there. So the photos I'm potentially taking, if I'm an estate agent, for instance, could be of the property. I could be taking pictures of the bedroom, the kitchen, the lounge, so on and so forth. And what we can then do with those photos is we can actually do things like object detection to detect kind of what photo it is. What room the photo's from. So there's some nice things there we can use using AI. We can also do things such as if this was a delivery application, so DHL, for instance, when they're delivering parcels, perhaps they have to take a photo of the front door and they've got to take a photo of the person's driving license if they're delivering something extremely expensive. We can actually use recognition of objects, as well as perhaps using something like OCR to look at the driving license details to make sure it matches up with the information we're expecting. So there's some kind of
quite nice that work, Joe, the recognition of objects.
Yeah, so in the background, we can actually pass this information off to a service. So I've created my inspection now. I go ahead and save, and we can then send that off to Power Automate. So Power Automate is our workflow engine in the background that can kick off an Azure computer vision API function. And that computer vision is essentially looking at that photo and using its intelligence to try and understand what that photo is, whether it's a picture of a football, whether it's a picture of a car, whether it's got a bed inside of it. And what that can then do is feed back to our application that can then ensure that that photo is in line with what we're expecting. So if we're asking for a user to take a photo of the person's driving license, we can check that it contains a driving license number, for instance. We know that the UK driving license number has a set standard, and we can check that that photo contains that string of text. And then our app, if it doesn't detect it, it can actually feed back to the operator in real time and tell them, well, the photo you've given us isn't correct. Can you please try again? And then the operator can do it again there and then.
So can we upload our own kind of custom objects and teach the system what those custom objects are, so that when it then sees them later in a photograph, it can then tell you, oh yeah, that's a driver's license, for example? There's
2 layers to this probably. There's the computer vision API that Microsoft gives us that does, I would say, it does some good image recognition. It can recognize kind of, a ball being in a photo, or a person's face, or the characteristics from a person's face. Going to the next level, we'd probably have to get kind of a bit more under the hood with it and develop something perhaps a bit more custom. But for everything you've seen here so far that I've just shown you, the ability to upload a photo, to store it against the app, that's literally just using the out of the box features. So there's a camera feature inside of PowerApps, there's a GPS feature, there's obviously text box features. That stuff straight out of the box. We then connect it up to Power Automate, which again, the Power Automate interface is really quite straightforward to kind of drag and drop elements of your workflow around. But that whole, diving a bit deeper for the driving license scenario probably would take a bit of customization just to deliver that.
Yeah.
So just a quick question on the address, Joe. You've got two options there: use GPS for current location or enter my address.
Yep.
You could use kind of a combination, right? You could have it use the GPS to approximate your location and then give you addresses nearby or something that you select from.
Exactly. I mean, like the classic scenario, I guess, is Uber, isn't it? Where Uber shows you, we think you're here, but drag and drop yourself on the map to where you actually are. Like there's obviously scenarios where we can actually make the usability a lot better for the user, because we all know GPS can be a mile apart. Like there are scenarios where it can be kind of not as precise as what you'd want it to be. So what Uber do to get around that is they give you a draggable map. But yeah, GPS gives us a longitude and latitude that we can then change to a physical street address that we think the user's at. So yeah, upon saving my inspection or my property management record, it will kick off that Power Automation. So it'll kick off perhaps an approval for this. Perhaps my line manager needs to do something. Perhaps I want to do some object detection of my photos. Or perhaps it just sails straight through and then the information gets sent across to SuccessFactors or Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics. There's a lot of things we can do with Power Automate in the background. PowerApps is our UI that gives us a great and flexible and dynamic user experience and UI user interface. Power Automate is our kind of our workflow tool in the background that really kind of helps shape our process and perhaps puts governance in there around things like ensuring you've uploaded a driving license or ensuring that you've uploaded a picture of a football or whatever. So some really nice things we can do there. Obviously I can click my record and view information about it. Perhaps I want to enable commenting on this so I can see kind of an activity log or something like that. We can create some really nice kind of mobile first experiences here where all of the information is captured inside of PowerApps, and then perhaps later on we can report on it using Power BI. Like John stated earlier, we can create some Power BI visualizations that allows for people to report on things like SLAs, perhaps identifying places where things are often going wrong, perhaps a certain user is kind of creating a lot of errors on the app or not doing what they're supposed to. We can use Power BI to really visualize all of the stuff that could be going wrong and go from there.
So Joe, just probably a bit of a basic question, but I think it's probably quite an important one. If our organization has built an app, how do we deploy it out to our users? Do we ask them to go to the App Store and download it? How does it work?
Yeah, so there's a few ways. So I mean, we're talking about PowerApps here. We're not saying it's a mobile app necessarily, because John's example was users are on a desktop and accessing it. So they could access it from Teams, for instance. They could be inside of Teams in the left-hand rail. There could be a link to the Power App that opens it inside of their Teams client, or potentially as a tab inside of a team. That's quite a nice way to surface a Power App. In the mobile / iPad example, there's a Power Apps app from the App Store. So a user has to download that if they want to consume the Power App. What that does is it puts that Power Apps app on your phone it can have 10, 20 apps inside of it. Users can then pin those apps to their home screen. So at that point, the app looks like any other app on their device. So they can click it, it then essentially shortcuts to the PowerApps app and launches that app on their phone. But yeah, I quite like the example of perhaps kind of pushing this out through things like Teams, for instance. So pushing it out into a Teams channel, or actually inside of the left-hand rail, pushing out a PowerApp there too.
And so when it comes to notifications, can we push notifications from the Power App, say if it's delivered through Teams, can we push it into the notification area of Teams, and notifications when it comes up as a mobile app on a mobile phone, can we push out notifications there that appear on the phone, on the lock screen?
So certainly for the Power App through mobile, pushing a push notification is out of the box. We can do that quite straightforward. We can send a push notification to the user's device. It comes up saying it's from PowerApps and from this app. With Teams, we can use flows. So we can use a flow to push either a bot notification to the user, so that a bot says, you've got a new notification from this app, click here to open that app, for instance. So okay, it's slightly different for each route there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Cool. So yeah, one thing that has been added a lot to PowerApps lately is the ability to create portals as well. So at the moment here, I've kind of used an example of a Power App inside of an organization, but PowerApps has now got the ability to create a portal for external users as well. So you can actually create Power Apps that are not just for your internal employee base, you can actually create external experiences so that other people can come, and perhaps it's a service desk that you want to kind of promote. People can then access your portal, log a ticket using that kind of very defined and refined UI. And yeah, that then goes through the Power App. It can kick off the Power Automate. It can then go into all of your other systems that you need it to be pushed out to. But you've got kind of a nice base for that app.
So one of the questions that's come up, Joe, and I knew that this would come up, is around licensing. So how does Power Apps get licensed? And in particular, if you're thinking about, say, frontline users who might not have an Office 365 license or anything like that, how does it work?
Yeah, so there's a couple of scenarios there. So if I just start with the internal users, so we'll assume everyone's got an Office 365 license and an AD account at that organization. The price ranges from around £7 per app all the way up to £30 for an unlimited amount of apps per month. So one app will run you £7 per user per month, and that's the people using the app. It's not everyone in your organization, it's just the people who are accessing that app. So if it is just frontline workers using that app, they're the ones that only need to be they're paying the £7. You don't need everyone in your business paying for it. But if you want an unlimited amount of apps, it goes all the way up to £30, somewhere in that region. Okay. We can create kind of multiple app experiences within one app, but obviously that does become more complex. So there are ways to kind of be more cost efficient with this stuff. But yeah, there's quite a range, and obviously at the £30 end, that becomes obviously very expensive. The portal stuff I spoke about, so perhaps in your example, Dan, no one has an AD account, they're classed as an external user potentially. We can create a portal whereby you can have up to 100 logins a day through that. So a login is classed as one user in a 24-hour period going there. They can go there as many times as they want, but it's one login. That is, I believe, £200 per month. So for portals, you can do that. If they're anonymous users, I believe it's £200 per month still, but you get up to 100,000 page views of your application for your £200.
But you can scale up beyond £200 though, surely.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's like their base pricing model for it.
Okay. All right, great. Any more
sorry, quick question on that. If I'm just thinking about the portals sort of concept, and maybe like one immediate example that springs to mind or use case would be having like an onboarding center that you send new hires to before they actually join. So that could be I guess sort of anonymous, but can you kind of just like give a code or something that people can use to access it anonymously, or how does it work?
Yeah. I mean, there's the Power App URL potentially is a long and obfuscated URL, but yeah, we can invite people to the app using a code, or we authenticate them using a Microsoft account. So whether they've got like a Hotmail or they've registered their personal account with Microsoft, that will then allow you to kind of authenticate them, but then be an external user, and then go through all of your onboarding stuff.
Yeah, so earlier on today, we had a meeting with one of our customers, and they sell cars basically. So they own a bunch of car showrooms dotted around the UK. They've got quite a few of them, and when we showed them this app, their eyes lit up because they could see that this would be a really good, using PowerApps would be a really good way of managing deliveries, because obviously they've got to deliver cars all over the UK, and there's various risks and potential issues that can happen during car deliveries. So obviously the car could get damaged, we could have some kind of fraud where the car gets delivered to the wrong person, the person's not, they go to deliver it and no one's there to pick it up. Things like also keys, apparently, these keys, modern keys on cars nowadays, they cost a lot of money, and they need to be able to prove that they've delivered the car along with 2 keys. And so they were thinking, yeah, well, we can use this. We can obviously track the user, the delivery guy delivering to the address using GPS, and then they can take a picture of the front door. They can take a picture of the users of the car buyer's driver's license. They can verify that driver's license against what they're holding on their records. They can take a photo of the keys, and all sorts of other possibilities, all enabled by PowerApps. So it's nice to see and hear examples like this of what's possible. We've got a little bit of time left, and I would encourage you, if you've got any further questions. We've not had a lot of questions today for some reason. We've had a few actually related to the bit at the start, but I won't go into those for now. But yeah, if you've got any questions, then please ask. And also, if you've got anything, if you've got an idea for a Power App that you would like us just to discuss now, then post that as well. And we can just talk about how that could be delivered. So yeah, do please ask away. This is about, I think, the only time, Joe, that we've and John, that we've prepared a webinar and we've not prepared any canned questions.
Because we never needed them until today.
No, you haven't. But that's sod's law for you. And you're letting us down, webinar attendees. You're supposed to ask lots of questions here.
What were the questions about the start, though? What was that?
Okay, so I got a question around LMS 365. So who creates and maintains content on LMS 365? And so essentially, it can be one of 2 things. It can be either you as an organization, you can have people actually create their own courses, so using content assets like PowerPoint presentations, or Word documents, or stream videos, that kind of thing. Or you can bring in different sort of off-the-shelf content. So this could be off-the-shelf content created by LinkedIn, for example, or other SCORM content packages as well. So you can bring those into LMS 365. So that's the answer to that question. And then there was another question around licensing for LMS 365. I won't kind of talk about costs for that right now, but suffice to say, it's based on the number of users, and they sell licensing in bands of 100 users. Okay, we've got some more questions coming in now, so great. PowerApps versus conventional PHP MySQL solution for a small database. So what are your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I would put the PowerApps in the bracket of it's extremely easy for anyone to manage, configure, update that PowerApp. So if I give you the example, let me just share my screen again. Can you see my PowerApps?
Yeah.
So you can see my PowerApp, right? So
your browser window, yeah, property management PowerApp.
Yeah, perfect. So you can see my kind of interface here. I've got kind of my property management. If I want to update the title, I make a change to the title. If I want to change how the picture looks, if I want to change anything here, I can simply just add it and change it all within the kind of the studio builder experience. So this is more catered for a power user or a kind of a citizen developer, as we call them now. So someone who has all of that knowledge and really understands the business process, but also kind of likes the IT side of things and can kind of understand kind of the simple elements that you get in an application. And it really is as simple as kind of dragging and dropping things onto the page to make it work. Your PHP MySQL application, like, yeah, your PHP is going to require knowledge of writing a PHP application. You're going to need to understand SQL queries. You're going to probably need to understand the server and the infrastructure in the background to it. This stuff is, a lot of it's all handled for you. A lot of it's just drag and drop. It doesn't need a hardcore developer to get that kind of proof of concept app out there. If you need something kind of more advanced, then yeah, you're probably going to have to write some custom code. But to get that kind of that version 1 or version 0.1 app out there, you can get a long way just using either the template apps that they offer on the store, or just kind of creating a blank canvas app, creating some screens, using the ones they give you on the left here, and just kind of putting your stuff on there and connecting it to a data source. So for me, it depends what sort of user you are, but I think this is easier from a wider audience perspective.
Yeah, I'd say probably, if you are a PHP MySQL developer, you probably pick something up like this really, really quickly.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing with this tool, is it allows you to kind of to iterate really, really fast. And yeah, lends itself very well to kind of agile working. So I've got another question come through again about licensing. So this is about the connectors. So there are standard connectors and premium connectors. Can you tell us a little bit about how that affects the cost of a PowerApp license?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely right. There's premium and there's the standard connectors. So premium, I'm trying to think of an example of a premium one. I think anyway, there's premium ones out there. Sorry.
ServiceNow, is that premium?
Yeah, I think ServiceNow is probably a premium one. We then get the common data service to chuck in on top of all of that. So yeah, there are standard connectors that you can use at one of the lower license levels, but the premium ones, there is a higher cost too. I can't give you the specifics right now, but the PowerApps pricing page, I believe, does give you like a lot more around which connectors you use. I'm just trying to bring up which one it is, which one you have to get to. Yeah, I haven't got it right here, but I'll link it in chat for afterward.
Okay. Great. Okay. Well, we're coming up to the at the end of the hour, so I think we'll probably call it a day now. So yeah, everyone, thank you very much for attending today. And yeah, if you are interested in talking to us some more about your Power Apps or Teams apps or any other kind of app development that you want, or any of the services that I mentioned at the beginning, do please get in touch with us. And thank you very much for attending.
Cool,
Cheers.
thanks guys.
Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye.